Good.
Hello and welcome back to MLQ Replay. We are here with week 7 of the season in the books. We are moving rapidly towards the back half of the year MLQ championships. A lot still to play for. And while we only had one official series this weekend, it was a banger for sure. The East Division just keeps printing hits right now. And not only was it a competitive series, but I think you could argue we got one of our first real upsets of the season with Washington coming in, a team that I think a lot of people thought was a step below this Boston squad, a team that had just lost to Charlotte a few weeks ago. And they come in, they win game 1, 110-80, and they win game 3, 140-100. Boston taking the game in between pretty comfortably. But to take the series, huge for Washington because it makes them leapfrog the Charlotte team that they lost to a couple weeks ago, and they will finish third in the East Division. Boston only needed the one win to clinch second in the division. So ultimately, the results don't have an effect on Boston's standings. This is where they were always going to end up, but obviously a meaningful momentum builder for Washington. Let's start with the Washington side. Ben, we saw a Washington team that maybe didn't put its best foot forward against Charlotte. We had questions about a lot of these young players they're relying on. They didn't have Brian Mulcahy in that series, but they didn't have him again in this series. What did Washington change this weekend to get the results?
They played complete games. You'll remember in Charlotte, they had a huge lead in game 1 and then kind of let Charlotte come back in that game. These games, aside from game 2, which they kind of got behind early and couldn't come back, and they played complete games, especially SOP, right? I think they were down 1 going in SOP in game 1, maybe tied or up 1, but in game 3, both games were really close. And they put the hammer down during SOP, no flag catch. Washington didn't totally ignore the flag, but put their resources into the quad ball game and ran up the score and flag runner on pitch in both games. And that was the deciding factor in both those wins. They were the more physical team than Boston. Their beaters in games 1 and 3 did enough to keep them in the game. Max Allen and Lulu were, again, the best beaters on pitch, but Washington's beaters kept them in the game, which was important. And we got a total star turn from Nathan Jun, which is not something surprising for UVA fans, but at the MLQ level, this was a big, big moment.
Yeah. Naresh, you weren't here, I think, when we talked about the Charlotte series, but Ben and I were saying it kind of felt like the stage was a little too big at moments for the young UVA core that is a big part of the team this year. Ben just mentioned what Nathan did in the series. I think Chantal did a ton of work in the series. What did you see from these young UVA players this weekend that maybe you weren't seeing quite as much earlier in the season?
Yeah, I mean, everyone talks about the speed of the game, and sometimes these players just need to be exposed. So even if they're not ready for that first series, second series, by the time you build towards champs, you're getting there. And I think that's what we're seeing, where teams that are trusting their younger players are realizing these younger players are ready for the limelight. They're ready for this big stage. We're seeing it from UVA side, where these players played in a finals a couple months ago against one of the presumed favorites, and they were there who down 9-0 after 15 minutes or whatever, and they came back and almost made it a massive upset. So they're not afraid of the big moment, and I think they just needed that exposure to really ease into it. And I think, quick little throwback, I was watching the Admirals Titans 2022 series a week ago, and commentary, they literally said the same thing about Leo Freed. Leo Freed against the East Division for the first time was getting thrown around by the Admirals, and then you saw him continue to build. And if we gave up on Leo after
Yeah, and Ben mentioned Nathan Jun coming in as a prolific scorer, which is something that I think everyone knew could happen from the college game. I think we even saw it at times in the Charlotte series, big this weekend, and we knew what Chantal could do on the offensive side as well, Stan Zadiki. But I'll tell you what I didn't fully know until this weekend. It was probably just a result of the way UVA played quad ball this season, which is basically just high press and then it's run and gun. Chantal's defense, I was not familiar with your game. She was stuffing people left and right. At one point, she just laid out, might be generous, but got a very strong full wrap on Carson Olazaba, completely took him out of the play, end of the play. Nobody was scoring on her hoop. Ana Luisa Nicolai tried multiple times, just kept getting denied. Ultimately, I think I disagree slightly with Ben in that I don't think the beaters from Washington necessarily did enough at any point during the series, but the quad ball defense from Washington was so incredible that we would have these possessions where Washington would just have no dodgeballs anywhere in the play. So Boston would inherently get all of the offensive rebounds by default, but Boston just still wouldn't score. Whoever was on the field, and it wasn't just Chantal, it was so many people stepping up and making hits and making stops at the hoops. I saw Shane McConaughey flying through the air a few times to make blocks. Obviously, Riley Stars is always going to be a prolific point defender, made a bunch of hits as well. I thought that was the story of the game and the story of how Washington won. It really was, the physicality, which I think has been a trademark of theirs for quite a while. Jumping over to the Boston side, Ben, we all kind of came out of that series very hyped, out of the New York series, very hyped for this Boston team and kind of the youth and kind of what they were bringing out. And I mean, obviously we knew, as you were saying, what Havlin and Shu were going to bring, but I think you could argue Tom DeMuth was also probably the third best beater at this series. I thought he played very well as well, made a lot of very nice beats. So in what ways did Boston come up short this weekend?
Their offense was terrible for two reasons. They weren't trying to put the ball through the hoop, hand through the hoop, right? They went for shots. They were overpassing, and they were the bad passes. So Boston's one glaring weakness on the roster is they don't have that obvious chaser who's just going to be able to win one-on-one consistently. And they have realized that themselves, I think, and they try to orient their offense to score in other ways. They use their beaters to create openings. They have distributors like Emma and Athena set things up at the top and then try to get it to the wings in advantageous positions. Even in those advantageous positions, those wing players were struggling to get through that really physical Washington chaser defense, and they started looking for these passes. And I think when Boston's ideal vision of their offense is 2 or 3 passes, a lot of cuts, and it ends on a really good look. But the timing was just not there. So there were cuts that happened too early or too late. They threw the ball into traffic and it got intercepted. A couple of times I think they just underestimated how high Washington could jump on those lobs over the hoops, right? It's one thing when Shane is blocking those. It's another thing when Zan Siddiqui is able to get up to the top of the top hoop and pull that down. But just too many bad passes that hit Washington players in the chest instead of their intended target. So many turnovers. And to what you were saying about the Boston beaters, there were plays where Washington's nearest dodgeball was out of bounds or across the midfield line, and Washington got to stop anyways by just being the more physical team. And if they had to get 2 or 3 on one play, eventually the ball would end up in the hands of Washington's keeper. I mean, Boston got 5 goals pre-SOP in game 1, which is just not going to be enough to beat anybody of note come championships.
Yeah, in that game 1, I think to kind of the tone setter was the very first half-court possession was a pass to one wing in a diamond, and the pass behind with no pressure went 20 feet over the person's head for a free turnover. That kind of set the tone. Naresh, what are your concerns about this Boston team after this series?
Yeah, I mean, this is something I said in MLQ replay last summer, and this is a trend that just Boston does not pass the eye test for me in the quad ball game during flag runner on pitch. If they don't catch quickly, I just don't think this team's quad ball game is there enough to be able to go point for point in a matchup where Washington just said, yeah, we don't care about the flag. We're just going to use our chaser advantage and run up the score as quickly as possible. Literally, and that's something I love. I love when teams say, we're going to score 3 goals quicker than you're going to catch the flag. And I think that's for the most part, if it's a close enough game, I don't mind that trade-off, especially when you have the chaser advantage. And I think the problem is it goes into the physicality aspect of it. Boston played like they didn't want to get hit. Washington wants to hit. And in this sport, being able to hit is such a massive equalizer, regardless of how great passing you can do and all of these things. If the ability to hit will get you on the field and will get you played. And you saw it this weekend where you saw a bunch of great hustle plays from the Admirals players. And I think at the end of the day, in every game, now if they're not catching quickly. But yeah, and then we can talk about the offense, but I'll stop it at that.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously one of the better flag runners of the season in this series as well, and Tyler Trudeau, which obviously creates, some strategic things to think about. But you were mentioning their struggles, in a fair and balanced flag runner on pitch. I mean, this was a tilted against Washington, in game one, where Max Havlin was somehow simultaneously setting up a bubble on flag runner and pressing Washington so that they couldn't leave their keeper zone. Truly one of the craziest things I've ever seen. But two of those possessions, Washington just stood at the edge of the keeper zone, threw a Hail Mary down the field, and somehow were the ones who got on the ball. Like you said, it just didn't feel like Boston had that oomph to play, in the way they wanted to. What I do feel like changed a little bit, Ben, in game two is it felt like head coach Kieran Collier kind of switched up their quad ball lines. They kind of went a little bit more into their depth. We saw a little bit more of players like Tommy Flathers, Will Richardson, who'd been kind of a face-off, get-off player for the team. And, it seemed like some of those players were maybe, being college players, I feel like a lot of club players get very passive about contact at times, but being younger players, they seemed a little bit more willing to take it to them. What do you think changed in that game too that Boston was able to get a little bit more going?
Part of it was just a great start. One of the things that we can forget about quadball, these games are not very long. If you have a bad first 5 minutes, it's actually very hard to come back from that in a game where at 20 minutes, right, the flag is going to come out. And Boston had a pretty perfect opening 5 minutes. Washington made a couple of mistakes with their turnovers, and Boston got up, I think, 30-0 and then 40-10. And then you could feel Washington, who'd been calmer in their pace in game one, start to push it a little bit, and that made it easier on Boston. They went into your depth, like you said. The Tommy Flathers fan club on YouTube was very pleased that he got more minutes in game two, and he did well in those minutes, so shout out to the fan club. And I thought that was the game, to your point about beaters, where it wasn't just Max and Lou. Tom was excellent. Cleo was excellent. The beaters just really, really were excellent for Boston in game two, and their chasers took advantage of it. And it was the game where the passing was working, where they actually were completing 2 or 3 passes and then finding a good look. Whereas in games 1 and 3, Washington was reading those passes a little better, or the beater advantage wasn't quite as big, so Washington had more time to react, and it just gummed up Boston's offense. So game 2 shows you kind of where Boston's ceiling is still quite high, because when things are going perfectly, that passing offense that they're trying to get to can work. But in games 1 and 3, when Washington was able to gum it up, it just wasn't the same game.
So Naresh, obviously, Washington showed almost exclusively hoop defense this weekend, and it really, really stymied this Boston team. As Ben was saying, this team just doesn't seem to have people who want to put a hand through the hoop. So, what do you think Boston can do? Do you think it's personnel? Do you think it's just rep strategy? Because, we saw very similar personnel, have a lot more success against New York. In fairness, those were slow scoring games as well. I wouldn't say those were huge Boston offensive pop-ups. So, what do you think going forward? Because I have to imagine almost everyone's going to be showing Boston hoop zone at championships.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, and I think the difference in the Titans series versus this series was just straight up expectations, right? The fact that we're thinking Titans are a champion's favorite, and you see a Boston team that's playing super young talent be able to match them, you're like, oh yeah, like this team is there. And now you're seeing Admirals, who in the beginning of the game, beginning of the replay, we again, Admirals are right there, but we thought there was going to be a clear step above, but that was very apparent that it wasn't the case. And that's something I didn't realize until Sunday night, when I realized they did this without Brian Mulcahy. They did this with arguably without their best point defender and probably their best offensive weapon. That sheer one-on-one, I'm going to win my battles and just dunk it through. Like, they did that without Brian. So I think my takeaway with Boston was these are all holes that we've seen all summer, except now because the expectations shifted, you're finally starting to see the cracks like actively be exposed. And so my takeaway is that they need to play a few of their depth players a bit more, because they looked a lot more dynamic. And similar to what you just said, Tommy Flathers came in with like a bolt of energy, and there was parts of game 2 and 3 where Zach D'Onofrio, I don't know. But no, D'Onofrio, holy crap. I feel like the commentating on Saturday, my apologies. But Zach and Flathers went in and just provided a ton of energy and spark for the Boston team in transition, in their ability to just play excellent defense, lockdown defense. And also there was an entire possession where I think the line was Tabitha Danielle, Nicola. It was Tommy Flash. Points where they're not paying attention to who has the ball and the rotations might be late. And so there are certain things where I just was like, not great. Also, this might sound like bias. This might sound like homerism. I genuinely believe they need to play Swathi Mana more. One of the biggest players coming out of League City last year, running their offense.
Yeah, definitely some good shouts there. I really liked when Tabitha Daniel subbed into game one. I think within her first two possessions, she ran up to the hoop zone and just dunked on someone, as if to say, like, why hasn't everyone been doing this entire time? I also think, you mentioned D'Onofrio, who, I think it's going to be a community-wide watching, his evolution, kind of, same way we were talking about the UVA players. Early on in the season, he was like a bolt of speed and energy who didn't realize he couldn't try to run through people. And then I feel like game one of this series, he was trying to be too passive. And then as the series went on, he said, oh, against the hoop zone, nobody's going to be trying to hit me. I can just get the ball in the wing, zip in, and rip something towards the top hoop. So obviously a lot of building to be done. But let's go back to the Washington side, Ben. As much as Naresh was saying that Boston's looked kind of their best against the top and they're worst against the lower teams. You could argue Washington's done the exact same because, I think we all thought they had a solid series against New York and then obviously won the series against Boston. But then, stands going into championships. Do you have them as a favorite to, get out of the lower bracket? What do you think this team can do in August?
Yeah, they've got the third seed, which means the easier path in the play-in bracket. They've kind of reestablished the higher level of play. I do want to say, as this game, I don't think his stats are going to pop out when they come out. He was much more in a facilitator role and a defender role, but he was just a very stabilizing presence for them that they missed against Charlotte. So I think that's huge. I think they will have him and Brian, I have heard, in Buffalo, which is huge. And I think their confidence is going to be at an all-time high, right? They just beat Boston, who's a team that we have discussed as a dark horse semifinals or finals team. Washington just beat them. They should think of themselves in that same category now, right? Who should we be afraid of now that we've beat this team? I think they have the easy path now in the play-in, just they're only going to have to win 2 games to get out. Probably a rematch against Charlotte or Houston. Those are both good teams. But either way, I think they have a really good chance. And then, coming out of that bracket, right? They shouldn't be scared of anybody if they were able to take 2 games off of Boston. They are going to be one of the most physical teams at champs, even against those top teams from other divisions. That can carry you a long way. That's what we saw in this series. And their beaters, to me, to go back to what you said, sorry, Boston had the better beaters in this. Washington's beaters made plays, though, at kind of key moments. I thought Joey Bay and AT thing, I kind of showed that by not knowing, they didn't know what they didn't know, and that was actually a good thing for them. They just saw opportunity to just kind of create chaos, and it led to a couple very key goals. A play where they came out during SOP, just pivoted away from the fly right side, like, oh, we can force a turnover right here. Huge. Again, you're not going to beat Max Allen for 20 minutes, but if you can force Boston's offense to just not even get a look 3 or 4 plays a game, huge swing. So I think they have a lot of players who are confident in themselves. They're feeling good off of this. They have a nice, relatively easy as far as that goes, path through the first bracket of championships. I'm really excited to see them in Buffalo.
Yeah, going off of what Ben was saying, I love the fact that Admirals have been consistently the only team that's willing to start a full court press the entire summer. They legitimately, we saw it against New York, and we said how they forced this New York squad full of Team USA players in that starting line they turned them over multiple times. And they did that just off of their ability to, one, be athletic, but also be in the right spaces. And I think that's with
Yeah. Yeah, and it's one thing to throw a defense that's unexpected out a few times a game. It's awesome, but in the Charlotte series, I think me and Ben came away very underwhelmed by the quality of the hoop zone they were playing. Clearly, adjustments have been made in that amount of time. One play, I guess 2 plays that specifically stick out to me. There's a play where the ball went onto the near side well for Boston, and Julian Neutzel was on the far side hoop, and we see players all the time get super stuck in that hoop. Neutzel immediately identified where I believe it was Olazaba on her side, took 4 steps off of the hoops, and was literally just sitting there waiting for the pass that came from Boston as they tried to swing to that side. A similar play with Chantal where she went, I think it was the play where she ended up hitting Carson Olazaba, was basically flying off that hoop before that pass was made. A lot easier to hit someone who has that amount of size on you if you can get to them before they've been able to make any move. So, seeing adjustments both in the interesting defenses they're throwing out and also the more stock standard defenses that they need to be running to make a run of championships. On the other side, Ben, a lot we were kind of high on this Boston team. We thought they were kind of the spicy second seed, a team that Chicago might end up wanting to avoid. I think that's at least what both of us said it was me and Naresh, I believe, last week. What do you think about this Boston team now, as we've seen their full regular season in the books?
Yeah, so we obviously, like we talked about at the top, they only had to win 1 game this weekend to lock the second seed. They did do that. And in game 2, they show that their ceiling is still quite high when their beaters kind of take over a game. And that's, I think, still what any team playing them is worried about at championships is what if their beaters just blitz us for the entire 20 minutes and they get a lot of easy ones? Because if you can force them into a half-court game, Washington and New York have shown you can keep them to a pretty limited offensive output. So the task for any team that plays this Boston team is to keep those beaters in check. And Boston's task, right, in the next few weeks is to figure out just how to generate a few more goals in the half-court because every game, I think they're going to have a couple chances to get some fast break opportunities because their beaters core is that good and that capable of making plays and looking to make those plays. But it's not going to be enough to carry them for an entire series, quarterfinals, semifinals, what have you. So they need some more consistent half-court offense, and we have to see if they can get there or not. That's going to be what determines how far they go.
Yeah, going into the Boston offense and figuring out what they need to do the next couple weeks, in like 2 weeks-ish, they really need to figure out their positioning when they're trying to go up against a 1-3 sometimes, where it felt like there were points where they were trying to get the numbers mismatch, but they were doing it on the strong side of the feet, they were doing it on the strong side where the ball is, and they had three people all in a triangle, which is what you want, but they were so bunched up together that one point defender could just take a couple steps and immediately get to the next passing option. And while their overall setup about how they wanted to beat the 1-3 is fine, I think they would have made it a lot easier for themselves if they actually had a lot more space. And this wasn't just younger players. With the line that I'm specifically in the play that I'm specifically thinking of was Athena had the ball at the well. Carson had the ball up top. And Athena had the ball up top in the well. Carson was up top. And they were just so close together that the point defender, who I think it was Riley, was able to just take 1 or 2 steps and immediately get back up top to guard the pass. Versus if Carson was on the opposite side and actually a sizable amount of space between the ball carrier and the point defender, you could have then used the concept of monkey in the middle, where you're just forcing the point defender to be dragged across, and then you pass it off to the opposite side. Where you're attacking with momentum rather than, as you said, where Julie or Chantel were actively trying to jump those passes or hit those lanes. So I think that's where they are. Positioning wise, I just was not as thrilled with what they were doing. So I think that's something they really need to be on the lookout for. And yeah, I mean, let's be honest. Going into Washington, though, they just got bailed out by their head coach stepping up and just ripping shots and nailing them. There was a point in game 3 where I think Gaffigan went like a 3-possession stretch where he was just crossing mid-pitch, looking off the defender, and just either cross-court zipping a shot to the medium hoop while he was at small hoop, or he was running in transition and then ripping a shot to small hoop, and it bounced in. And like that's just an added extra dynamic ability of their offense, and the fact that they were able to get these shots were pretty solid for them. So I think that's where they've shown Washington right now. I think has shown multiple true threat at champs is where is what I want to see out of Washington. And with Boston, I think it's just really got to nail down these fundamentals, because these passes sometimes look and you can win a lot of games just off of good fundamentals, in my opinion.
For sure. Well, I could not have paid Naresh for a better transition, because we are going to talk to the head coach of the Washington Admirals and a longtime sharpshooter of the sport, John Gaffigan. John, thanks so much for taking the time tonight.
Thanks for having me.
You know, John, 2 months ago, we were trying to get you on for the after the Ottawa series, and I mean, credit to you being a father. You guys said bedtime's a little early there, and you said, but if we beat Boston, I will come on the show. And you made it happen. You and your team made it happen. So congratulations to you guys.
Thank you.
So I kind of want to take you back and kind of talk about the quick 2-week turnaround, or a few week turnaround, as it were, coming out of that Charlotte series. Obviously, you've been on this team for a while. You guys have never really lost to Charlotte. You guys come in They get the series win over you. And now you've got this Boston series that you need to do something in to kind of get your seeding higher. What's the attitude? What's being said? And what are you guys trying to work on in that interlude between these two series?
Well, I think that we learned a lot by playing Charlotte. I learned a lot as a coach of like things you can and can't do. I think we made some mistakes as a coaching staff. And I mean, you guys are not giving Charlotte enough credit. Like, I'm going to let you guys know that if Charlotte brings that roster to championships, they're going to be a hard out. Like, I was just like, I don't think any individual played poorly in that series. It was just really close game. They caught 2 snitches. We caught 1, and that's the series. So I think it was acknowledging that and then also focusing on both our defense and our offense, finding things. And luckily we had 2 weeks to go through practice, and we were able to make the adjustments and just come out on top against Boston, which feels great.
Speaking about defenses and adjustments, we talked about that full court press that you guys seem willing to run. Kind of, what was the thought process behind that? Why did you guys want to make that a big part of what you guys were doing this season? And how do you feel about the way you guys have been running it all year?
My thought process is that I don't think people are very good at throwing the ball in this sport, and I don't think people are very aware of what's happening in the sport. And I wanted to let our athletes go out there and be more aware and more active and take advantage of opportunities to get the ball, not be so passive on defense.
You mentioned athletes, and obviously you guys have gotten a big, influx of athleticism from this UVA program. Kind of talk about the contribution some of these younger players have made and kind of what they've been like as they've worked their way into a program with a lot of people who've been with the team for a long time.
They're all great. They're all competitors. We have people from UVA. We also have some really good players from JMU come and joined us. And it's like, as people go out, the fact that we can bring in new people to replace them is essential. Like we have a stacked roster, and it's because of these players, and they're coming in, and it's great as a coach. I think I was like, when I was looking at coming in to coach, I was like, if I can just get Jules and Rachel and Tyler, and if I can just get them and I get Bernie back, like maybe we can, like, if I get these pieces, I can make this into, I believe in these players enough, we can make this a championship. And then I don't get them, but I do get Chantal and Caitlin and Joey, and they've been filling in, just as well as I could have hoped. And, I'm really optimistic that they can, continue to grow into the legacy and keep this program strong.
So, Gaff, you've obviously been around the sport for a while. It's a very old fantasy team shirt that you're wearing today. What do you think as a coach are the advantages of having seen so many different iterations of this sport? What can you take from that history, or do you think the sport's changed so much that there's really not that much to be learned from those earlier days?
I think just having a little bit of like historical knowledge helps, but I think this sport is still in its infancy, really, when you're trying to draw up what to do. And all these things, I still think we haven't figured it out, even in the slightest. So I think, if you look at the evolution of a league like the NFL, way back when rules changes, people get bigger, faster players, things change. And I still think that, this is, I wanted to coach because I wanted to kind of innovate a little bit and kind of bring new things to the scene. So that's kind of been my focus. Yeah.
I want to ask you about a couple specific moments. One of them is one we were just talking about earlier, the way you guys broke a couple of those presses in game 1. Was it, as Ben posited, something that because you guys play against your own press so much in practice, you guys think you're specifically equipped to, or do you think this is just kind of an audible in the moment that happened to work out?
Well, I don't want to go too specific, but it's it's pretty easy to break if you know how to do it. And we coach our players on how to prevent them from doing the easy things to break it. So I think our players and you're in that situation and the clock's ticking down, it's more about instinct. So I'd say it's more about the players in that instance, just understanding where they need to go and then executing on it more than anything we did in practice.
My next question is about a couple plays in game 2. You hit back-to-back shots at one point. The first one, it appeared, I don't know if you did this intentionally, to hidden ball trick Carson Olazaba. And the second one, you shot underarm, sidearmed through the near hoop. So what was that intentional? Were you trying to hidden ball trick it there?
Oh, 100%. It was like a beater play going off on the right, and I saw everyone's eyes turn. So I just like, if I could just get to the keeper zone. It's a very fun play because like if it works, it's a free goal, and if it doesn't work, everyone just starts shouting and pointing at you, which is also fun. So like, I enjoy it both sides. You got to break it out once a game, so it's fun. And then it's just a hip shot. Like it's not anything special. So yeah, open hoop. Love it.
You obviously took a little bit of a break and then you kind of came back. You've been back with the team for a little bit. I felt that like when you first came back, you hadn't quite properly figured out the amount that you should be shooting versus maybe not pulling up in certain points. It feels like you've kind of gotten a better idea of that. So did it just take some time to get used back to the pace of the sport and where the opportunities were to shoot?
I think that for me personally as a player, whenever I try and force the shot, it doesn't work out. But whenever I just see the hoop open up, I mean, I think in game 3, I had a couple, and it was really just like, oh, the hoop's open. I have a player there that's going to get the rebound. I can just comfortably set up this shot. I don't have to like work hard about it or like overthink it or try and overthrow. It just, comes out naturally. So just finding rhythm in there. And that's something that I can do as a player. So I can't force it. I just had to let it happen.
So obviously your regular season's in the books, MLQ championships to look ahead to. You guys get the 3rd seed, put you in a good position to possibly get out of this lower bracket. What are kind of expectations, goals? What were you telling your team afterwards as you kind of look ahead to this championship?
I mean, I think we just said good job, like good work, everybody, and that I don't think we have too many expectations other than to just play our brand of quad ball and compete. Like that's it.
Very, very real chance that in just a 5-team lower bracket, a rematch with Charlotte could be on the docket. Is that something you guys kind of have circled? Something you wouldn't mind getting a chance at?
I think a lot of players on our team are excited for that, and I honestly would love that too, just because our games. I had a good time in the Charlotte series. Like they were fun games to play, all 3 of them. Like it was a lot of really good plays from both teams, and it was fun to be a part of. So that's why I'd like to do it. But I know there's a lot of other people on my team who'd love to like kind of reassert ourselves in that relationship. But I just had fun with it, so that's what I'm looking forward to.
Awesome. Well, John, thanks so much for taking the time tonight. Best of luck to you guys the rest of the season and at championships. We're excited to see you guys there.
I just got a real quick shout out my wife who's making all this possible, who's putting the kids to bed right now and, looking after them. They came and saw their first quad ball match. So it was a good set for them. So thank you guys for having me, and bye.
Awesome. Thanks so much, John. So that is going to do it for another edition of MLQ Replay. We've got 2 series next weekend, and they are both big ones in their respective divisions. Up in the North Division, the Minneapolis Monarchs will be traveling to Chicago to take on the Prowl. Winner takes first place in the division. That's at 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern. And then down in the South Division, in Kansas City, the Soldados travel looking to clinch the division. Again, winner take all in that matchup as well. That's going to be at 7:30 p.m. Central, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. We hope you turn into all of that on the MLQ Network. It's going to be an all-day quad ball, a lot of good games, and we'll be here on Tuesday to break it all down. As this tea time later in the week, I'm sure Tyler's going to have something to say about his flag running experiences this weekend. So we hope you guys check out that as well. We thank you all for watching. Thanks to John for coming on, to Naresh and Ben for taking the time, for Miguel producing behind the scenes. We'll be back next